Welcome to the interesting documentary YouTube channel, where today I'll tell you about the horrific 1933 Soviet experiment. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want more content like this. Now, enjoy watching. 1930s, the brutal dictator Joseph Stalin began exiling people he considered a threat to the regime. Initially, he got rid of his opponents this way. He exiled several thousand of them. But later, more and more people were exiled, who, according to the authorities, were criminals and posed a threat. As the numbers grew, it was decided to exile them to Siberia, which was thousands of kilometers from civilization. It was thought that these people would no longer pose any danger because they would simply be too busy trying to survive. Eventually, millions of people were exiled to Siberia, some of whom did not survive the long journey. But the worst fate of all those exiled to Siberia befell 6,700 people. They were sent to Nazino Island in western Siberia. The Soviet authorities came up with a brutal social engineering experiment aimed at settling people in the most remote parts of Siberia. According to their idea, the settlers would cultivate millions of hectares of land. It was supposed to be transformed into fertile arable land, suitable for farming, and to create self-sufficient communities. It was believed that the regime's order was so perfect that people would be able to establish communities even in the harshest conditions. In May 1933, a small flotilla of barges arrived at Nazino Island. They'd brought over 4,700 people. Some of them were weak, emaciated. Diseases spread rapidly. Even before landing on this island, 27 people did not survive the journey. When they landed on the island, they saw a snowy, rather small island, where there was not even a shelter, food, or even tools with which to build some kind of shelter. The Soviet soldiers who brought them there had promised a few sacks of flour. But for the first few days, they refused to give them. So another 249 people died of starvation, no matter how bad the conditions were. But after a few days, another 2,000 people were brought to the island. The soldiers finally decided to give out the flour. The people were already starving to death. Chaos ensued. Thousands of them rushed to the ships, wanting to get some food. The guards started shooting at people who tried to take these bags. Then the soldiers decided to take the bags of flour and return to the ships, and try again the next day. But the next day, everything repeated itself. Over 175 people were shot. Then the soldiers came up with a plan. Assign a foreman to each group of 150 people, who was supposed to take a bag of flour and distribute it to his group. But the foremen were often assigned to criminals. They took the flour and shared it with almost no one. So the vast majority of people didn't get almost any food at all. People who managed to get a handful of flour mixed it with river water, and often got dysentery, and they died. In such a difficult situation, people built rafts, wanting to cross the river. But often, the rafts would break apart, and people would end up in the water, unable to reach the other shore, and would drown. Soldiers would also shoot at them. It was strictly forbidden to leave this island, and those who managed to escape from it ended up in the vastness of Siberia, where the chances of survival were very slim. On Nazino Island, true chaos began. Almost immediately, the seeds of cannibalism appeared. Gangs of people began to form, who would roam the island, killing the weak and eating them. The soldiers who saw this did nothing and could hardly do anything. A local woman who often visited this island was surprised during one of her regular visits by the number of people there. There used to be no living soul here. She recounted how she saw with her own eyes from a boat a group of men running up to a woman, dragging her to a tree, tying her up, and starting to cut her up. After the group finally left, the woman who was tied to the tree was still alive. A man who could have been her relative introduced himself to her. He tried to help her. He untied her, but she died in his arms. Of the approximately 6,700 people on the island, only about 2,000 survived the first month. When Stalin found out that this island had turned into a cannibal island, he immediately closed it. and the 2,000 exhausted people who survived were taken to another labor camp, where many of them died. These 6,700 symbolize only a small part of the people who were sent to nowhere. If you want to see more similar videos, leave the keyword "want" in the comments section. And now, see you in the next interesting documentary video.